You are standing at the time when the earth was first formed. There's no name for the oceans yet. No continents, no sky, no blue to speak of. Just a whirling ball of molten rock trying to remember who it was supposed to be. Gravity is still tightening its grip. The moon hasn't even properly moved in yet. It's pacing around the edges, unsure whether it's joining the dance or starting a new one. The air is thick with vapor, and the ground crackles under pressure that hasn't learned restraint. But deep inside the crust, where no eyes will ever see, the earliest drops of groundwater begin to form. Not rivers, not lakes, just moisture, seeping into cracks, sliding between pores of ancient stone, curling like fingers into the earth's memory foam. Now, turn down the lights, turn on the fan, and listen to some soothing music. And we'll get started tonight. The water doesn't rush. It settles, as if it's trying to remember where it came from. How do groundwaters form? Here's the first thing no one told you. Groundwater isn't rainwater with commitment issues. It's the final form of a very old story, long before rivers learn to flow and oceans claim borders. There's infiltration, raindrops worming their way down into sand, limestone, fractured granite. Some of it takes months, some of it takes 10,000 years. There are aquifers older than our oldest gods. There's a deep-sounding crack below your feet. It's the earth pulling itself apart to make a chamber, to breathe, to store. Early groundwater, trapped under volcanic glass and basalt, wasn't just a puddle. It was a pressure machine. Trillions of tons pressing down, slowly feeding the early cycle of steam, condensation, and eruption. Water became a hidden architect, deciding which volcano would pop and when, which mountain would rise and where a rift would collapse. And no, it didn't just sit there. How do they affect the earth? The crust is not a stone wall. It's a sponge, full of memories. Water doesn't just pass through it. It changes it. It weakens faults, smooths rock, builds pressure. Imagine this: a tectonic plate hesitates to move for 1 million years. Then water arrives, just a little bit, seeped into the cracks. The plate sighs and slips. You wouldn't call that water passive, would you? Fast forward. Continents now have names: Gondwana, Laurasia. Pangaea's big drama is playing out in slow motion. The land is splitting, rejoining, arguing like tectonic soap opera. But underneath it all, there's still water, always. It seeps under deserts. It flows below the Himalayas. It collects in underground caverns that could swallow buildings whole. And it moves so slowly, so sleepily, that it takes 100 years to blink. You, meanwhile, are standing in a wheat field. The sun is shining. Nothing strange is happening. But 70 meters below your boots, water from the Ice Age is still drifting beneath your feet. That's not metaphor. That's the Ogallala Aquifer, one of the largest bodies of groundwater in the world. spanning 8 American states and still carrying echoes of glaciers that melted 15,000 years ago. We drink it, we farm with it, we drain it, and don't give it back. Now here's a thought. The world map doesn't just have political borders or tectonic plates. Groundwater and the Earth's historical map. There's a hydrogeological map too. It shows you where life could exist, not just where it does. Entire empires rose not because of what they could see on the surface, but because of what lay underneath. Egypt didn't build pyramids in the desert by accident. Beneath the Giza Plateau, a freshwater lens sat deep below the limestone, protected from salt and sand, waiting to be tapped. The Nile was only half the story. Rome? Its empire expanded where springs followed. Roman engineers didn't just pick locations, they followed groundwater trails like veins, planning aqueducts before cities were even built. Who studies groundwater? Today, we call them hydrogeologists. But back then, they were just the wise ones, water diviners, people who felt the ground. Some carried dowsing rods, some just listened. And now, we use satellites to find underground water. We launch them into orbit just to track subtle gravity shifts caused by empty aquifers. You know, something's powerful when we shoot machines into the sky just to ask if it's still down there. But let's go smaller now. Because inside the rocks, deeper than roots and darker than silence, there's life. Bacteria as an alien tool. You've seen microbes in a microscope slide. But there are bacteria living 3 kilometers underground that never see sunlight. They eat iron, they breathe sulfur. Some are older than your evolutionary line. These microbes don't just live in groundwater, they are groundwater. They filter it, process it, change it. And here's where it gets strange. NASA studies these deep living microbes not because they care about your well water, but because they might look like life on Mars. That's right. Bacteria found in South African gold mines, miles underground, survive with no oxygen, no light, and only hydrogen from rock-water reactions. That's alien life on Earth, buried in water. You don't need a spaceship, you just need a drill. Now imagine this. You're walking on concrete, a city above you, traffic, shops, smartphones buzzing. But under your feet is a buried river, older than agriculture, still flowing between gravel and stone. It doesn't care what you built above it, it only moves, slowly, silently, and forever. You slip beneath the crust, not falling, but sinking, gently, quietly. The surface disappears behind a curtain of soil and stone. The temperature shifts, the air is still, but the walls around you are alive with moisture. Drips echo in the dark like a distant heartbeat. You're descending into a place where light has never lived, but life has never left. Welcome to the underground kingdom. not metaphor, not myth. Just a hidden realm, governed entirely by groundwater. You won't need your eyes down here. The locals don't use theirs. Let's start with the weird ones. Blind fish, pale shrimp, worms that look like ghosts with stomachs. These creatures have lived their entire evolutionary story in eternal night. Their bodies gradually forgetting color, pigment, and even the concept of day, they float silently in aquifers, moving only when the water says so. You wonder, how does groundwater control life like this? Because down here, water doesn't just support life, it dictates it. No tides, no sun, no wind. Just slow movement through stone pores, carrying the tiniest crumbs of nutrients, a trickle of calcium, a breath of iron, a whisper of carbon. For most species, that would be starvation. But not here. Not in this world. Here. Evolution has bent its spine to groundwater's rules. How do they affect the earth? Picture an aquifer as a long, slow-moving river locked inside spongy rock. Some stretch for hundreds of miles. Some dive so deep we can't follow. But everywhere, in every crack and crevice, groundwater is setting the terms of life, deciding who lives, who adapts, and who dies off completely. There are species that can only exist in one specific cave system, in one specific limestone bed, with water filtered through one specific layer of fossilized coral. That's how exact groundwater can be. And the diversity? Groundwater and biodiversity? Impressive and invisible. Researchers have discovered more than 500 new species in Europe's underground streams alone in the past 2 decades. And those are just the ones we found. Many are so small, so soft-bodied, so alien-looking, that scientists had to invent new tools just to study them. Imagine a shrimp the size of a rice grain, transparent, blind, older than every human language. It's there, still moving. What's more shocking? Some of these creatures purify the water just by being alive. You heard that right? There are microbial mats, thin veils of biofilm that feed on contaminants in aquifers. Bacteria that break down pollutants, digest metals, convert sulfur. They are nature's filtration system, buried so deep that we didn't even know they were doing our job for us. But what happens when we interrupt that? You're now in Bangladesh. Above you is a rice field, below, a poisoned aquifer. In the 1970s, aid organizations dug thousands of tube wells to provide clean water, trying to save people from surface diseases like cholera. What no one realized, the groundwater, though crystal clear, was rich in arsenic, naturally occurring. Filtered into aquifers by geology, not pollution. That clean water has since poisoned millions, slowly, invisibly. How do you fix a system where the very water you thought was salvation is also the executioner? That's groundwater's trick. It doesn't just sustain, it selects. Let's talk trees. There are forests in Brazil, Australia, Vietnam that don't care much for rain because their roots stretch deep, drinking from aquifers that may have formed during the last ice age. These are called phreatophytes, plants that have learned the ancient art of long sipping. They survive droughts not because the sky helps them, but because the earth remembers for them. Some of these trees send their roots down 40 meters, a journey that takes years, but leads to permanent water. In deserts, you'll find one green patch, one living miracle. Chances are, a Majnuk Ngam is hiding below. And what about mammals? Take the elephant. In dry season, a herd of elephants doesn't pray for rain. The matriarch remembers. She walks for days to a dry riverbed, then uses her tusks and feet to dig. Shallow at first, then deeper, then there it is, water. Clear, cold, ancient. The young drink first, other animals wait. They've learned not to fight the elephants. The elephants are groundwater's chosen. In Australia, Aboriginal peoples long ago learned to read the ground like scripture. A single type of termite mound might signal moisture below. Certain plants meant the presence of a perched aquifer. They passed these maps down, generation by generation, without a single written word. Who studies groundwater? Biologists? Sure. Hydrogeologists, definitely. But the best students of groundwater are still the non-humans. Termites, roots, elephants, bacteria. All of them respond to it long before we do. They don't ask questions, they just obey. Even coral reefs listen to groundwater. Yes, even there, at the edges of coastlines, fresh groundwater seeps into the ocean through hidden vents. These freshwater pulses help regulate the reef's salinity, deliver nutrients, and maintain chemical balance. Cut them off, and coral begins to bleach, not from heat, but from hunger. And yes, groundwater controls the sky too. In places like the Amazon, groundwater-fed trees release vapor into the air. Massive plumes that rise, condense, and form clouds. These clouds drift, rain down hundreds of kilometers away, and start the cycle again. In other words, groundwater makes weather. Quietly. Let's not forget caves. Enter Sandung in Vietnam, the world's largest cave. Inside, there's a jungle, a river, a full weather system, all made possible by underground water shaping the rock for millions of years. That river carved rooms big enough to hold skyscrapers. The animals inside, entirely new, entirely hidden, entirely groundwater's idea. And then there are people. There, a young girl in Mexico, exploring a cenote, one of those flooded sinkholes made by groundwater erosion, dives too far and finds herself in a submerged chamber no one has ever mapped. Her flashlight catches on an underwater altar, human bones, offerings. The Maya believed these cenotes were gates to the underworld, Turns out they were also gateways to survival. Drinking water. In the middle of a jungle, what's the moral? You don't need to see groundwater to belong to it. You already do. You are standing beneath the earth now. Not buried, just beneath. As if the crust has opened itself slightly, allowing you to drift down into its velvet dark, where the air is still and moist, and the rocks hum with secrets. This is not a place of death. It is a place of memory. Above, the world continues as usual. Dry winds, asphalt cities, people pouring water into kettles. But down here, something else pulses. You're close to an ancient rhythm, one that predates your name, your nation, your species, and you can feel it, not with your hands, but with your bones. The same way you sense a storm in your teeth or feel sorrow in your shoulders. This is where water waits. The earliest stories were not written. They were whispered, carved into cave walls, painted with pigments made from blood and berries. And many of those stories began with water. But not the loud kind, not rivers or oceans, no. The sacred water was quiet. It dripped from ceilings, oozed from stone, appeared in the most unexpected hollows. Groundwater. In Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates gave birth to the first cities, the idea of water under the earth was not merely practical. It was divine. The god Enki ruled the Abzu, a subterranean ocean believed to be the source of all fresh water. You might picture the Abzu like a great library of moisture, spreading beneath the world, feeding springs and mines alike. Priests in Sumerian temples would descend into cool, echoing chambers, collecting this water not just for thirst, but for ritual. To drink from the Abzu was to remember your origin. How does groundwater form? Slowly, tenderly. Over centuries, rain seeps through the soil, filtering through sand and clay, losing its name and gaining wisdom. It collects not in rivers, but in aquifers, hidden oceans beneath deserts, limestone vaults beneath jungles. And yet somehow, our ancestors knew they were there. They spoke of holy wells, tears of the earth, veins of the goddess. You see it again in ancient Egypt. The Nile is famous, yes, but where did its water come from? Beneath the sands, the Nubian sandstone aquifer system sprawls like an invisible skeleton. Egyptian priests believed in none, the watery chaos below creation. Temples were often built near hidden springs, and sacred lakes were fed from below, not above. In Hindu cosmology, too, the underworld isn't a place of punishment, it's a reservoir. Patala, one of the 7 lower realms, is rich with serpents and water and jewels. Here, groundwater becomes metaphor, coiled, mysterious, powerful. Nagas, the divine serpents, are guardians of wells and springs. To pollute such a place was not merely wrong, It was a spiritual betrayal. So, Bhaum, who studies groundwater today? Scientists, hydrogeologists, environmental engineers, but also shamans, also farmers. Also children who grow up listening to their grandparents describe the old well that never ran dry until the new road was built. You might not think of groundwater as a storyteller, but it is. It holds evidence of past climates, volcanic eruptions, even meteor strikes. In some aquifers, water is over 10,000 years old. That means it fell as rain when mammoths still walked. Drink from that, and you're sipping Pleistocene silence. Cultures across Africa and Australia preserve this memory. In the Sahara, where nothing should grow, oases appear like hallucinations. But they are real, supplied by groundwater systems so vast, so ancient, that they predate the desert itself. Tuareg nomads speak of the water that remembers. Aboriginal Australians, through their Dreamtime stories, map the hidden springs and underground rivers across thousands of miles. Water beneath your feet is not just hydration, it is inheritance. Let's talk about cenotes. In the Yucatan Peninsula, the Maya believed that these sinkholes, openings into the groundwater, were entrances to Xibalba, the underworld. Some were used for ritual sacrifice, yes, but others were for communion, for prayer, for diving into the bones of the planet to ask it questions. You can still swim in these cenotes today, feeling the cold, unmoving water wrap around you like time itself. Why does it matter that groundwater is part of culture? Because it roots us. It teaches us that water is not just surface level, not just what flows in pipes. It is deep, patient, alive. And when we ignore that, when we pave over springs, drill too deep, extract too much, we don't just damage the earth, we erase stories. In Iceland, they have sagas, long winding tales of gods and men and lava, but also of hot springs. Geothermal water, rising from beneath, is not just a utility, it is a birthright. In Japan, the onsen tradition connects bathers to ancient, mineral-rich waters from deep within the mountains. You enter to clean your body. You leave having soothed something deeper, even in modern faiths. Water drawn from hidden places holds power. Think of Lourdes in France, where a spring revealed to a peasant girl now draws millions. Or Zamzam in Mecca, said to have appeared when Hagar struck the earth in desperation. These aren't just wells. They are reminders that the planet listens, and occasionally it answers. You may be wondering now, does groundwater have a memory? It's not memory like yours, with birthdays and heartbreaks, but it remembers in its chemistry, in its temperature, in the fossils it carries, in the isotopes that whisper how long it's been underground. Some aquifers are contaminated with human waste from just 50 years ago. Others are still pristine. What does that say about us? The biological relationship is also profound. In isolated groundwater pools, especially in caves, you find organisms that exist nowhere else. Blind fish, albino crabs, microbes that feed on sulfur and rock. They don't need sunlight. They need silence, minerals, and time. These life forms are older than the pyramids, possibly older than language. And what about bacteria? The underground is their cathedral. Some scientists now believe that bacterial life may have begun not in oceans, but in the warm, mineral-rich pockets of groundwater. Hydrothermal vents under the seabed. Yes, but also aquifers in volcanic stone. These bacteria don't just survive, they sculpt. They shape the chemistry of entire regions. In fact, if alien life exists, it might look like this: invisible, subterranean, bacterial. Groundwater doesn't shout, it doesn't glitter, but it shapes nations. Consider how the American Dust Bowl was worsened by the overuse of shallow aquifers, or how the decline of the Aral Sea was influenced by groundwater mismanagement, or how ancient cities collapsed, not from war, but from wells that went dry. We live in a time where satellites can measure the weight of aquifers from space, where AI can predict the movement of underground water like a game of chess. And yet, despite all this, many people still don't know where their water comes from. And isn't that strange? Because once, not long ago, you would have known the name of the well. You would have thanked it. You would have whispered into it when no one was listening. You are standing beneath the earth now. Not physically, of course, but close enough. You can feel the pressure of time above your head. Sediment, fossils, entire empires turned to dust and pressed into the weight of history. But you're not here for the dead. You're here for what moves, what pulses, what breathes between grains of sand and layers of clay. You are here for groundwater, not as a passive resource, but as a tool, a device of the planet, a thing that does. At first glance, groundwater seems like a background actor in the grand theater of Earth. Quiet, subterranean, unnoticed. But that's just the surface illusion. Below the crust, water becomes intention. It sculpts, it engineers, it remembers. Rain falls from the sky. Yes, but it's down here where it's archived, processed, and used in the most complex ways imaginable. Earth isn't just storing water, it's deploying it. Start with the weight. Water, deep underground, presses against faults and fractures over centuries. That pressure builds, subtly influencing tectonic movements, not violently, not always, but certainly, like a whisper that eventually shifts a mountain's posture. When aquifers are drained too fast, by humans or by natural shifts, the earth can collapse upon itself. Sinkholes open like mouths, the land sighs downward, the ground becomes less ground, more memory foam for vanished liquid. But Earth doesn't just suffer these losses, it responds. It changes strategy. Aquifers aren't random, they're patterned. There's a logic to where they form, how they move, and how the crust allows them to spread. You're now tracing this blueprint, finger by finger, through geological code. 1,000 meters below the Sahara, ancient rivers still breathe. Underneath the Atacama Desert, one of the driest places on Earth, aquifers from past ice ages cling to relevance. Their presence stabilizes the land, cools the crust, balances stress. In this way, water underground doesn't merely exist, it calculates. That leads us to the planet's strange capacity for storage and sabotage. During ice ages, vast amounts of water were locked in glaciers. Sea levels dropped, pressure changed, the crust bounced and cracked. But while the ocean receded, groundwater took on a new role. It pressed inward, cushioning land masses against collapse. It became ballast, a form of internal gravity. Without this inner hydration, entire tectonic plates might have slid into panic. Now, shift your senses to Iceland, volcanic, chaotic, and yet stable because of its groundwater. Here, aquifers absorb some of the heat and pressure from magma chambers below, like a planetary safety valve. When eruption does come, the interaction between magma and groundwater can turn explosive. Phreatomagmatic eruptions, they're called, steam becomes a weapon, a reminder that Earth never truly forgets what it stores. But this isn't just geological flair. It's biological programming. Because deep aquifers are not sterile. They teem with life, microbial colonies, unbothered by sunlight, photosynthesis, or surface politics. These organisms survive on chemicals leached from rock, hydrogen, sulfur, iron. They build their own ecosystems, complete with predators and prey, all within pitch-black silence. These aren't just survivors. These are designers, builders of minerals, modifiers of porosity. They change the very structure of the rock they live in, influencing how water flows, where it pools, and how it eventually resurfaces. Which begs the question, is groundwater shaping biology? Or is biology shaping groundwater? Pause there. Because the deeper you go, the stranger things get. Some theories suggest that life itself might have begun in the wet, mineral-rich pores of rocks, subsurface aquifers, warmed by geothermal energy. No oceans, no sunshine, just chemistry and time. In this version of Earth's origin story, groundwater isn't just a support system, it's the midwife of life. Now, fast forward 4 billion years. Humans drill into aquifers, build cities above them, pump billions of liters a day for agriculture, drinking, factories, but every time we remove water, we change something else. The land sinks, earthquakes shift, rivers dry up, even the air changes, because groundwater interacts with carbon. Pump enough water and the carbon balance flips. Aquifers release CO2. It's all connected. You're beginning to realize something now, aren't you? Groundwater is not a quiet character. It's a planetary algorithm, a geological voice, a living file system that records, rewrites, and reprograms the Earth itself. It responds to ice, to heat, to pressure, to gravity. It feeds forests, whispers to roots, balances the weight of continents. It cracks fault lines, it sculpts caves, it births bacteria that modify the crust like software updates. And we, standing on the surface, mostly ignore it. Until a well runs dry, until a city sinks, until a spring, silent for centuries, begins to flow again. Earth is not random. Its hydrology is not an accident. The planet uses groundwater as a tool, shaping continents, controlling climates, sustaining subterranean biospheres, and orchestrating the slow rhythm of crustal movement. It is both, in every sense, one of Earth's most powerful devices. And now, you're rising from the underground. The water drips away. The pressure lifts. You blink in the soft light of the surface. But something has changed. You have walked through time, drifted beneath mountains, slid through clay and salt and carbon. And you've seen the planet not as a rock, but as a system. A breathing, humming, trickling organism. Everything was touched by groundwater. Empires may have risen because it flowed beneath them. Ecosystems evolved to chase it. Even volcanic fire, that raw scream of geology, depends on it for balance. Subterranean bacteria, millions of species we've never met, are rewriting rock itself as they float in ancient pools of iron and methane. Maybe you once thought of water as surface level, rain in the gutter, rivers to fish in, oceans to fear, but the real story was always beneath your feet, hidden in silence, pressed in darkness. Acting on time scales you were never taught to respect. The earth doesn't move unless water lets it. And now you know. So before we go, let this last image stay with you. A drop of water, slipping through soil, slow, determined. It finds a pore, a tunnel, a whispering crack, and rests. That drop may stay underground for 10,000 years, or 10 million. And when it moves again, it will carry with it the memory of where it's been, the temperature, the minerals, the weight, the life. This is not just water. This is Earth's script. Now, take a breath. You've listened long enough.